Hello, hi, welcome to Proxy. It's Yowei. This is the third part of a 3-part series on layoffs. If you haven't heard the first 2 episodes, go back and listen for the full ride. How do you feel about working on the weekend?
I'm tired. That's how I'm feeling. I feel like it's a beautiful day, and I'm about to spend it inside.
I'm in the car with my husband, Kyle. Last October, right after my story for the big famous podcast got killed, I was still feeling bad about the layoff. This was before I started working on the series, and I had all these thoughts, emotions, and creative energy, and no outlet. So I decided to use the oldest trick in the book for processing feelings, making a song. You lay me off. I cry. But I know nothing about writing songs, which is why I've enlisted my poor, sweet music producer husband, Kyle, to help me. We're on the way to his recording studio on a Saturday, his day off, to work on the song.
I mean, I want to make you feel better. I love you. I want to help you. But no, I make songs every day. I don't need to make another one.
Wow. Okay, I'm learning things. I thought this was like a collective project of healing from the layoff, and like we were on the same page about that.
No, it's healing for you.
Is it not healing for you at all?
No. But that's okay. I do it for the love.
Speaking of couples processing, still healing from a layoff months later, how are the cats?
The cats are doing really well.
Homer is right here with me, wanting to be pet and being needy.
It's April 2024. I'm back on the line with Miles and Elliot. It's been about 9 months since that extremely difficult moment when Elliot was laid off, and Miles survived his own layoff scare. And for the most part, they're moving on. But some of the anger is still there.
I think I'm not so angry about the layoff anymore, because honestly, I understood very quickly that that's what they do. I think I'm just more angry for the way that I was treated as a person.
It still stings and it still doesn't feel right.
Miles and Elliot are still struggling with how Elliot was treated and with the person most responsible for that treatment.
The HR person who specifically was there and was the one who delivered the news and who laid him off messaged me the other day to ask me for a favor.
Recently, they heard from a coworker that it was this HR rep who spilled Elliot's coffee on his stuff, ruining one of the few photos he has of his mom. This is the same HR rep who didn't explain Elliot's layoff paperwork, who wouldn't let Elliot go back to pack up his desk because it was company policy, even though they knew about other laid-off coworkers who got to go back to their desks and say goodbye. For Miles, he can't put the HR rep out of his mind, even if he tries. He still works with her. To this day, this HR rep hasn't acknowledged Elliot's layoff to Miles or apologized for the way the layoff went down.
Look, I know it's not personal. I know she probably did not make that decision personally, but it's still personal to me. That's still the person who acted as the mouthpiece and as kind of like, I don't know, I'll be a little dramatic, like the hand of God in the situation, reaching down to wrench stability from the lives of us mere mortals, you know? You can't help but resent the hand a little bit. I mean, if I could really see her, like, face to face, like, there are some things that I would, like, ask or that I'd say that I cannot politely say while maintaining my employment.
Yeah, what are those things?
I guess part of me just wants to know, like, does she ever feel bad? Does she just grab some coffee in the morning and just knock it out? I don't know. How do you do this job? It seems kind of awful, actually. And also at the same time, there is part of me that's like, what even is your job? Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you even adding to the company? Like, a little, like, if I were to be a bit rude with it, I'd be like, what is your point here? What actual skill are you bringing? Because I only seem to see you show up when, like, something bad needs to happen for some reason.
Elliot, what about you?
Why the double standard? Why was I treated differently? And why the other employees were allowed to pack their things and I wasn't.
And then, of course, there's the smile.
Yeah, so we had to let you go. Smile, smile, smile. And I'm like, why are you smiling? This isn't funny.
Unanswered questions with no opportunity to ask them. This is one of the things that's hardest about layoffs. The black box of not knowing what's really going on behind the scenes. And even if you did get a chance to ask your questions, could you trust what they told you? Okay, so here's my pitch. I would love to set up a time where the three of us could bring our grievances and hard questions to an HR rep.
Ooh.
But not, our HR rep for any of us, but just like another HR rep who can spill the tea about layoffs, how they work, why companies do what they do. And we can also tell them how this process hurt. So that's my pitch. Would you have any interest?
I will be curious to see what they say, honestly, because I am pretty curious of what the thought is behind it or what the training is for them. So I'm pretty curious.
Miles?
I would follow Elliot's lead on this one just because the layoff is his experience first. And if he's up for it, I'd be up for it.
Okay.
After the break, Miles and Elliot talk to the hand of God. We test the premise of this podcast with our very first Proxy conversation. And our Proxy HR rep spills the tea, which is a lot better than spilling the coffee on irreplaceable family photos. That's when we return.
Hi there, it's Zakiya, the host of Hang Up, a reality dating show with no rings attached. Think of Hang Up like a cross between The Bachelor and Love is Blind, but queer, with a focus on dating and connection rather than marriage. On Hang Up, you don't just get to eavesdrop on dates. There's also a series of eliminations. And in the end, there's a twist. The new season is out now, so stay on the line.
Shit, it's getting brutal in the other room. Yeah! Layoffs suck!
Another weekend rolls around, and we're back in Headroom Studios. While the band in Studio A is shredding and being all metal, Kyle and I are in another room, birthing a new genre, layoff hyperpop.
All right, you ready?
Yeah. Will I ever find work? Guess I'll stay home and twerk. Okay, so I'm a little off on that last note. Not a problem. Kyle works some auto-tune magic.
Will I ever find work? Guess I'll stay home and twerk.
But Kyle has to use so much processing to make me listenable, it's breaking his computer.
It's only this bad when I work on this song.
Because of all the auto-tune.
It's all the auto-tune, it's all the copying and pasting, it's all the...
But it's too late. I'm hooked. Just like with my feelings, I want more processing.
Oh my god, wait, can you do an auto-tune of me crying? That was kind of cool.
No, we could do that.
Because it was turning it into a melody. So let me just... Oh my god!
I think that is great.
It's crazy what a little bit of auto-tuning does to your confidence.
Yeah.
Dare I say I'm having fun talking about the layoff?
Self-worth, like dirt. Self-worth, like dirt.
Well, singing about the layoff. Badly.
I think what this song is doing for me, I feel like it's like reassociating the layoff for me. Like it's reframing this really negative thing and like putting this absurd, silly container around it. And honestly, like it's given me something fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think having something else I think a way to like reroute the conversation is really nice. And I also think that's just what is beautiful about music is that it's like it's magic. It can kind of just turn the poison into your life into like, nectar. Wow, that computer was really fast. Time to listen.
Who is that?
Who is this?
Who is this pop
Who's
star?
this multi-talented radio producer host?
Helps if I unmute. Hello.
Hi. How are you all feeling? There was a shrug from Elliot, a shoulder shrug. The day of the Proxy conversation, Elliot and Miles are tense on the Zoom.
I'm just kind of want to get it over with, honestly, quite frankly.
Are you having second thoughts?
No, I don't know. I just was feeling pretty angry yesterday about the whole situation.
This Proxy conversation is supposed to help Elliot, but so far, it's bringing up bad memories of the layoff. Meanwhile, the Proxy HR rep is on hold in the virtual waiting room. Her name is Katie Maillard. I work with producer Kim Nadervane-Petersa to look for the right proxy. Kim talked to more than 10 HR reps before finding Katie, and she seems like a great fit. She's worked in HR for over 15 years, and actually, she prefers the term people operations. She's been the head of HR, she's built HR processes and systems, and she's laid a lot of people off. By her count, over 250 people. So we thought she could help decipher what Elliot and Miles had been through, what the company and HR rep might have been thinking. Plus, she seemed like a real human.
I kind of want this person to see my pain and anger in my face. So yeah, I think I want the camera on.
This was something I was worried about. Even though the HR rep is a proxy, and she had nothing to do with Elliot's layoff, she's still an HR rep, the villain in Elliot's story. I was worried the conversation might be too much for Elliot, or that he'd take out his anger on somebody who didn't deserve it. And if we need to talk, I check with Elliot to make sure he's cool with proceeding. He says okay. I remind them we can stop at any point. Okay.
All right.
Y'all ready for me to let her in?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
I click admit, and there's Katie in a light blue blazer with straight, long brown hair, sitting in front of a bedazzled microphone.
Hello.
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 Nice. Look at you guys with your professional mics.
We start with a round of introductions.
I'm realizing now that I didn't I forgot to mention my pronouns as well. I am she, her. So
Katie seems nervous. She did not say this much when I talked to her on the phone. And Miles and Elliot, I'm watching them on screen, and they're not their usual chatty, friendly selves. They're tight-lipped. Elliot's got a furrowed brow. He's sitting perfectly still, like he's steeling himself. I set the table and make sure everyone knows what we're going to do in this space. We're not trying to make you feel uncomfortable, Katie. But I'm hoping we can have an open but cordial conversation. But I'm not sure it's going to work. We begin. I'm curious, how did you end up in HR? Did you grow up wanting to be in HR?
My first thought is to say nobody grows up wanting to be in HR, but no, I fell into this. So
Katie Maillard went to school for child development and has a master's in social work. But then somebody she nannied for offered her a position that turned into an HR career. So when you were deciding to go into HR, did you know that layoffs were part of the job? And how did you think about that?
So I graduated at the height of the recession of the late 2000s. So yes, knew that layoffs were part of this, knew that it was kind of the shit part of HR. I was hoping to try to avoid them as much as possible. But I think tough conversations are just a part of the job. And I've always been pretty comfortable having those. We're not going to do a therapy session here to talk about my childhood, but I've always had difficult personalities in my life that I've had to kind of figure out how to communicate to in a way that moves us forward.
And then I turn it over to Miles to address the hand of God. But his first question is less of a handshake and more of a tiny slap.
Could you explain what someone in HR actually does?
Yes, that is a good question. And I've also been laid off. So I've had the experience to be on both sides. I'm here representing, I think, HR, but I've also been the person that was laid off, just as a kind of a heads up there. So HR does a lot of different things.
It feels like we're in a conference room with Miles and Elliot at one end of a really long table and Katie on the other side. Up to this point, Elliot hasn't really engaged in the conversation. But finally, he speaks up.
I do have a question. In your experience, in your training, how much takes part of having these hard conversations with people from different cultural backgrounds, different beliefs, and value systems?
100%. Yeah. So most of my experience was in New York City and LA, two very diverse groups. And I've also worked globally. So I think my kind of
It's like Elliot and Miles are grilling Katie, a reversal of the dynamic that usually happens when you're in a meeting with HR.
So for the most part, I was just trying to make space for humanity in a lot of these conversations and try to build trust with that employee so that they can be honest with me if they're not understanding the reasoning I'm giving or if they're not understanding what the hell is going on.
And a follow-up on that question, do you receive any type of training on that, or it was more on the field that you learned those experiences?
Like, do you get training on how to be human in these conversations?
No, not at all. So it's interesting. So there's some people have degrees in HR, okay, but that's mostly in like labor law and compliance. There is a governing body.
And then I ask Elliot to share his layoff story with Katie.
That morning, I came to work, I was editing some videos, and I was drinking coffee. This is important.
He talks about the surprise meeting, how the HR person smiled when she laid him off.
She smiled, like a very creepy, dead in the eyes smile.
How he wasn't allowed to go back to his desk to pack up his stuff because they wanted to save him from, quote, humiliation and embarrassment. Plus, it was company policy.
I was not allowed in the building. They took my ID immediately.
And then he talks about how the coffee he'd been drinking earlier at his desk got dumped into his box of stuff.
Everything was drenched in coffee.
And how he got into his car to drive home and was worried about getting into an accident because he was so upset.
I felt like there was no concern for my livelihood. There was no concern for my mental health. There was not check of like, hey, are you okay to drive? Do you need a couple minutes by yourself to calm yourself before you get into a car? No, they just say you have 10 minutes and you have to leave, or we call security and kick you out.
Okay, so we'll just pause right there. Katie, do you have any reactions right away?
I've got a lot of reactions and I have a lot of questions. And my first thought here is, am I allowed to curse? Are we going to just beep it out?
I'm not working for NPR anymore.
Fantastic. Jesus fucking Christ is my first thought here, because like I have terrible layoff stories that I've been told, that I've seen, where people just like show up and their emails are disabled or the door's locked, or like they come and, you know, their fate is decided by which color card they pull out of a box. Like there's crazy shit that I could tell you about. Your story is the least human story I've ever fucking heard. Like that is horrifying. And I am so sorry that this is what happened to you, because this is just like a series of poor decisions where this company decided that you were not a person and that you didn't matter. And that's not okay. But I just honestly want to apologize on behalf of all people professionals for how that person acted, and how the company empowered that person to act.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Elliot's furrowed brow relaxes for a moment. It's the first time anyone in HR has ever apologized to him. It's like they're still at that long conference room table, but they're a couple chairs closer.
Another thing that I feel like the HR actually falls short is they handle me a package and they say, just read that at home on your own time. I actually didn't open that package for 3 days.
Yeah.
And then I finally opened, and then I find out that it was a severance pay.
Yeah.
And all the information about it and professional psychological tips for your mental health that were actually ridiculous. Like, please do not kill yourself. That was one of them, actually.
Oh, thanks for telling me.
We'd have to go find that paper to like read it, but it was so
It was
condescending.
terrible. But She should have walked me through that package.
Yes, 100%.
I am a foreign. I'm an immigrant. This is my first corporate job. I do not know the culture. I am not middle class. I had always been poor. Education was the only thing that got me out of that. And I come here trusting that you, who have been educated, who probably already have a mentality of a middle class, no disrespect, thought that I knew what was happening. I didn't. I have no idea. Very ignorant about it. I was just left to dry.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was a severance package that was offered, because typically, in terms of how termination conversations go down, you want to talk about severance and you want to talk about the package that's being given, because that's the best way to help folks move from the shock to, okay, let's think about how this is going to be possible. So the fact that that wasn't even brought up is very surprising to me. And also, my perspective is that regardless of what background you're coming from, HR should walk you through this intensely legal document. It's not written in English, right? It's written in legalese. And so every single time I have walked through the document explaining paragraph by paragraph what the headers mean, and suggesting you go find your legal counsel if you'd like to, because even if you have grown up knowing a bit more of the game changes. The game being corporate America. You're not even required to offer severance. So if you've gotten laid off at 3 different companies, you'll have 3 different experiences.
So Elliot not getting to go back to his desk to pack up his stuff, that's entirely up to the company.
And I know for a fact that this is not the company's policy. That was a lie, because I know of another coworker and friend who got being laid off maybe a month after. She was allowed to go back to her desk and she was allowed to pack her stuff.
Yeah.
When I find out that, I was just like, I wish I wouldn't sign that severance package, because I would have sued them. That's what I would have done. Because if when I find out that she was allowed to go back and say goodbye, and she was allowed to pack her baby pictures, and she was allowed to pack her personal stuff, I wish I would have never signed that paper. I would have sued them for that. That was my stuff. That was my personal property.
Yeah.
And I felt so disrespected by that. It's because I'm brown. It's because I'm trans. It's because I'm an immigrant. Like, I just don't know. I just don't understand that. And I know you answered some of that. And I guess I just want to hear, what was the thought behind that?
Yeah. I have questions about this HR rep. Were they early in their career? Were they experienced? It depends on who they were reporting to, like how much practice they did for this. Because this could be a case of, I'm sorry, but you got the shit HR rep and the other person got the one who actually cared, because there's so much variety in how they treat people. And the policies around like whether or not you can go to your desk are also like, they're moot if they think there's a risk. Okay. And so the risk is, like she mentioned, embarrassment. That's not the risk. The risk when you let someone go back to their desk is that they're going to talk to other people and distract them from their work and let them know how shitty this company actually is. Okay. So that's typically why HR might not let you go back to the desk, because they think that there is a risk that you might talk or destroy property. And it's not necessarily about you. It could be that this HR person had terminated someone previously who threw their laptop on the ground. And so they're never letting that happen again. But that's a shitty reason. Just because one person might cause damage doesn't mean you have to take away the humanity of everybody.
I have a question. In your experience, and the moments that you had layoff of people, have you been instructed to give the news and smile at the same time?
Obviously, no. However, I have had people on my team that I've had to coach around this because they have nervous smiles. There's no reason to smile. That's not something that anyone's taught. You're taught to understand that this is a somber experience, and that I don't know. The smiling to me just makes me think this person was really nervous. And honestly, she kept fucking up. So she was probably getting more and more nervous as time went on.
I have a question. I heard that crying in a layoff meeting is like a big no-no. for the HR rep and the managers. Because like you're making it about your feelings rather than the person being laid off, their feelings. It seems like an incredibly intense emotional moment. And so like I wonder if to just get through it, you kind of have to disassociate or something.
Yeah, it is a really hard emotional line because also we are told these things like don't apologize, say the least amount possible because anything you do can and will be held against you in a court of law. And remember that you're representing the company. So they almost tell us not to be humans. And sometimes I also see HR reps kind of dissociate to a certain extent as a coping mechanism, and stop considering you human.
Say more.
Okay. So what I mean by this is like, I've had examples of not just HR, I've had managers where it's like as soon as they make the decision that they're letting someone go, that person sucks. Like they don't want to talk to them. They don't really think about life afterwards. They see you as a problem that needs to be dealt with. And I think that like sometimes that's a coping mechanism. So you don't realize that you're taking away the livelihood of someone. HR is also trained that we can't be friends, which I think is bullshit. And I haven't allowed that to happen. I am friends with my coworkers a lot of times. And when you can't be friends with people, it means you don't eat at lunch with them. You don't kind of humanize and like get to know folks. And I also found that the more human you are in these conversations, usually the easier it is for that employee to move on and to find a new position and to come to terms with what happened. And the less likely you are to have them angry and to have a lawsuit on your hands. So I don't know. I feel like the training we get is counterintuitive and I don't think it's effective.
I'm going to step away for a sec because I left my water and I'm
Oh,
thirsty.
yeah.
So I'll be back in a moment.
Do you need like a hug break or anything? Sometimes I take hug breaks in the middle of the day where I just go give my kid a cuddle.
Elliot, do you want a hug? I can come down.
No, it's just like, oh, maybe I have like a minute to check on Instagram and find a cat video or something. Just to kind of reset.
All right, time to take a hug break or cat video break, or both. When we return, Miles finds out what's the deal with Danger Day. Plus, I'm going to play you the Layoff song. Hey, everybody, it's Yowei. All right, some generic ad break music. Oof, that is generic. All right, so this would be an ad break, ideally. But in the meantime, I want to let you know about my Patreon. If you want bonus episodes, access to the newsletter, and other treats, go to patreon.com/proxypodcast. Again, that's patreon.com/proxypodcast. And you'll support a completely independent show. Thanks so much for listening and your support.
Gracie's Corner. Gracie's Corner.
Oh my God. I don't know what is it called, but I listen to it sometimes on YouTube.
We come back from break, and just to give you an idea of how the dynamic has shifted, we're talking about songs that pump us up and listening to Elliot's go-to, this affirmation song by Snoop Dogg and Doggyland.
There you go.
Wow, wow, wow.
Every time I hear it, it just makes me smile.
Miles, Elliot, and Katie are laughing together. Things are feeling more comfortable. But we still have difficult questions to talk about. It's now Miles's turn to tell Katie about his story.
Here's my half of the story. Kind of in the month after Elliot's layoff, I became increasingly obsessed and fixated on whether or not I was also about to be laid off.
About how the specter of layoffs turned him into a nervous wreck as he looked for clues.
I was full conspiracy theory, like the picture of the guy with like the board, like that was me. I had the formula.
And then Miles mentions that there were layoffs last January, then last June, and then last July. And that sets off an alarm bell for Katie.
Usually I find layoffs they're supposed to follow either a strategy change or they're supposed to follow like an issue with cash flow. Layoffs are a short-term cash saving strategy, and they're not always in practice. In theory, they're a short-term cash saving strategy. So let's say they did them in January, gave it a couple months to stabilize, waited for the severance to stop, saw in June, oh shit, we're still spending too much money. We need to do more, right? But to do them June and July, to me, I don't mean to accuse them, but I feel like they were trying to space these out to avoid having to be held accountable to the WARN Act.
Okay, so what Katie's mentioning, the WARN Act, is pretty much the only regulation we have around how layoffs go down in the US. There are a bunch of exceptions and complicated details. But basically, if a company has a certain number of workers and wants to lay off a certain number or percentage of workers at a single site of employment during a 30-day period, then the WARN Act gets triggered, and the company is required to give 60 days advance notice. So what Kitty's suggesting is that the company might have done smaller rounds of layoffs, spaced more than 30 days apart, to avoid the WARN Act. I actually talked to another HR rep who said she would absolutely suggest this strategy to a company. Why? Because the WARN Act makes layoffs more expensive. It's more work. It's a whole thing.
Not to say that's what they were doing. I don't know what the numbers are, but that could be a reason why they would space them out. So that's one thing I noticed when you were talking about those, because otherwise no company wants to do layoffs month after month, because as soon as that layoff happens, you lose productivity for the remaining staff for weeks. And by the time you're getting it back, you're doing another round. That's crazy. Like, that's a crazy thing to do.
Okay, here's a big question, Katie. I'm really curious about how the list of layoffs actually gets made. Because usually they tell you it's not about your performance. That's what Elliot was told. That's what I was told. It's what a lot of my friends were told. It's not about your performance. This is a business decision. So I just wanted to ask you what is going on.
In the case of a layoff, you will always be told that it was a business decision, because that is the line that we're putting when we submit your termination, right? If it's a layoff, it means that job does not exist anymore. So how layoffs should happen and how the decision should go is starting with a strategy, right? What are we not going to focus on in order to afford losing this many people? And then you see who was doing those jobs. And typically those are the jobs that would be laid off, right? That's obviously not anything to do with their performance, but that's not really what happens. So in my experience, sometimes it flows from strategy. Sometimes it's who was the last person hired. Sometimes they take cost into consideration. Sometimes the companies gives each department head and says you have to cut 15% of your workforce. And then HR goes and makes a spreadsheet to see how many people that is for each department, and sits down with whoever we're allowed to sit down with in terms of who the company allows us to be transparent about the layoff with, to figure out who's going to go. Now, the shitty thing there is that sometimes it's your great boss who's making that decision, who has no idea what you're doing. So in that case, it may be actually random. And random seeming, because it's based on the information the C-suite executive has, meaning what was managed up. Were you ever on a project that they heard about? Were there any issues that were escalated to them? But sometimes it is, looking at performance. We might go back and look at performance reviews, and whoever had the lowest ratings would be the top of the list of thinking, hey, these are the ones that we should be getting rid of. And I think all of that to say, most of the time, it's not about you, right? It's about probably poor decisions that leaders made in hiring for a role that they weren't going to let settle, or that they didn't have budget for, or changing strategies. And it just sucks that because we have this kind of at-will employment system in the US and every state outside of Montana, American businesses aren't as thoughtful in hiring because they know that they can let folks go easily.
We only have 30 minutes left in the interview. I felt like I got to ask my big question, but Miles and Elliot still need to ask theirs.
Can I ask you a question, Katie?
Please.
So this particular HR rep, she was my HR business partner when I had first joined the company. And, we actually had probably a closer relationship, I think, than most people have with like their HR business partner, at least at our company. It's such a large company. She had always at least seemed like she was trying to kind of support me when I first started at the company, and I was having some difficulties adjusting and just kind of trying to find some support. And literally the week after Elliot was laid off, I had signed up and helped plan an ice cream social that was happening at the building that my husband had just been laid off in. And I was there in the cafeteria, like handing out the little ice cream sandwiches. And like I knew there was a chance I was going to see her, but it was still super weird and awkward for her to come by because she had to know that I knew like how that all went down. And she just smiled at me like completely normal, just very brightly said, "Oh, so good to see you. Good to see you, Miles. Thanks for coming by today." And I was like, "Yep, here to help, here to hand out sandwiches." I don't know. It was just, if you were in that position, if you were her in that moment, and maybe you had nothing to do with making the decision or whatever, but you had to be the one who delivered the news, and maybe it didn't go off so well, but like, what would you have expected from me in that moment? And also, what would you have done yourself in that moment?
That's a good question. And I think it depends on what point in my career I was. I think in the beginning, I would hide from you because I would be embarrassed about how that went down. What it sounds like she did is tucked this away in a neat box inside of her and forgot it happened. And also, Elliot, that might not have been her worst termination. So while it went horrible with you, there could have been ones that went even worse that she has top of mind, or she had something else horrible that happened, and oftentimes you forget about it. And I don't want to seem cold, but like it is one of those, you take a couple of days and then you're expected to get back to work, and you're expected to be a shining light for employees after you just had this horrible day yesterday. So there isn't a chance for HR folks to be real either. So like I feel a little bit for her, but also like super shitty to come up smiling, "Hey, how's it going?" I think what I would do now is, obviously I wouldn't have had the situation with Elliot happen, but I would have first apologized to Elliot, because yeah, you can't say you're sorry for terminating someone, but I could say I'm sorry for spilling coffee on your stuff. Like I can say I'm sorry for the experience that I see that you had here, and I can come up to your husband and say, I am so sorry that we had to have that conversation. I wish I didn't have to. And to be honest, like, are you okay being here? Right? Like, this is where it went down less than a week ago. And I would totally understand if you also said, "Hey, I can't hand out ice cream sandwiches today." But all to say is, like, the really sad thing is you'll be surprised how quickly leadership moves on.
Mm-hmm. I do have one last question. Right now, in your role, in your experience, is it a particular program in place that advocate for those employees that are getting laid off with their mental health?
So yes, so there's a lot of things that I've been doing when I've had to go through rounds of layoffs, and I've been in charge of planning them. First is, we make sure that in that conversation, it's your manager, who's somebody that you know, and it's HR. And HR is trained to be as human as possible, to stay on and let that person cry if they need to have the conversation that they need to have, to go into detail about severance. Just so you know, severance is negotiable. What they give you is not always a final offer. You can always ask for more. Worst they could say is no. And usually there's different things that you can negotiate too. So like, you could ask for insurance continuation. You could ask to keep your laptop. There's lots of things that you can do just to get a little bit more. And unfortunately, who asks? Straight white men.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who ask for more negotiations for when they're joining. They're the ones who ask for more in severance. And that has been my experience as the person who needs to negotiate with them. So ask, I think, is the number one. But we'll walk you through that paperwork. We'll let you know how much time you have to get back to us. And then we talk about the supports. Okay. So the supports that I've usually gotten to offer and that I've negotiated with my leadership to be able to offer are around mental health supports. So we always have on-demand therapy and coaching. So we have a certain amount of sessions for each employee. So that's what I've been trying to do at the last couple of rounds of layoffs, is not just have conversations about, hey, this is done, but like what happens next and how can you be supported throughout that journey? Because not only are you losing money, but at least I know in America and in a lot of other countries, we attribute our identity to our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you meet someone in a bar, you ask them, what do you do? Right? Not, where do you live? Where are you from? What do you like? Do you have kids? Right? No, we ask people what they do. You lose your job, you lose a part of your identity, even if it's not your fault, especially if it's not your fault. It's very confusing. And honestly, people go through the stages of grief, all of them.
Yes.
So having that support for those that are leaving, but also for those that are staying. So there's intense survivor's guilt that we often see for people that are remaining there, of like, man, why did I make the cut? Like my best friend just had a kid and now he's gone. We offer those same mental health services often to the folks that are staying.
By the way, I have paid $1,900 on therapy since I got laid off.
Yeah.
Yes. That does not count the medication, by the way.
Yeah.
So hopefully it was worth it, right? There are things that I'm sure we've paid for that weren't quite as worth it, like everything I bought on TikTok Shop.
No, this was worth it. I mean, I'm here talking to you because I went through that process, it is worth it. And I think one of the reasons why I was excited to do this with Yowei is because I want to talk about the mental health aspect, because that was the most impactful for me. Financially, I was privileged. I had a husband who has a job. So financially, yes, it was worrisome, but that wasn't my major impact. It was my mental health. And I wanted to breed awareness of that. So thank you for answering that question.
At the end of the conversation, I look at the Zoom boxes, and it feels like Elliot, Miles, and Katie are no longer at the conference room table.
Strong, and we're like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is
because
crazy.
it's been taken away from
They're at a bar, and it's the end of happy hour, the best kind, where shit has been talked, secrets revealed, and support and solidarity offered.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing with me. Like crazy shit, man. Thank you so much for being open, and I really appreciate you letting me in.
Thank you for letting us ask you those questions.
Thank you so much for having those hot conversations with us.
And Yowei, would you mind just sharing my email with Miles and Elliot too? So you guys, please feel to reach out. I'm happy to help talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was our first Proxy conversation. How are we feeling about it?
Weirdly enough, I actually do feel like I have some closure on some of those kind of lingering questions I had.
Me too. Yeah.
I'm so happy that I could help give you guys a little bit of closure here.
And you're not her, but to talk it through and to sort of be able to ask, like, I guess this is where I name drop a proxy, to name drop like a proxy or a placeholder.
Free labor.
I did not pay Miles to do that.
Yowei, as you're kind of embarking on like this new concept and this new show, I don't know, I just wanted to kind of provide to you on air that I did actually find this kind of helpful.
Again, I want to repeat that I did not pay Miles for that endorsement of Proxy, but I am looking for people to help pay for the show. Advertisers, looking at you. Listeners, also looking at you. After pitching a bunch of production companies this past year, I have decided to self-finance and self-release this show because I wanted to retain ownership of my work, not be subjected to the whims of some higher-up who one day decides to shift strategy. So I put my savings into the series, and I have a whole season planned out for later this year, but I just need money to make it, to pay for a part-time editor, part-time producer, and many other things. That's where my Patreon comes in. If you want to hear a bonus episode every month and support the making of a full Proxy season where I take on your niche emotional questions and connect you to a proxy for a conversation, go to patreon.com/proxypodcast and become a paid member at $5 a month. That's patreon.com/proxypodcast. I crunch the numbers, and if I get 3,000 paid subscribers, I will break even on what I spent on the series and be able to sustainably make the show. This month, if you become a member of my Patreon, you'll hear a bonus interview with sociologist Ofer Sharon, where we talk about a bunch of stuff that's not in the series, like whether or not you should be worried about posting about your layoff online, given all the stigma, and the wild things that recruiters told Ofer to his face. If you want concrete tips on how to navigate unemployment stigma or how to better support someone who's been laid off, this is the bonus episode for you. I have to say, talking to Ofer helped me understand my own layoff feelings. In fact, one of the lyrics in my layoff song is inspired from his research. Is this the first time anyone has made a song inspired by your research?
Ever. Yes, this is a historic moment right now. Epic.
Which reminds me, I promised I'd share the song. So one of my hobbies that I've been doing for the past few years is to pole dance. And I'm not good. It's just fun. And for the fall recital, I was like, I want to make an interpretive layoff pole dance while dressed as a Kleenex box.
That sounds so fun.
God.
Because it's just funny to me. And then I couldn't find any layoff songs to dance to. So then I was like, I need to make my own layoff song.
Yes.
And then it just kept ballooning. And then I was like, well, I need to make a music video now.
Oh my God, did you?
Yeah. I have here today something to present to you all.
Let's do it. Oh my God. Oh my God. I gotta say, I don't know if I would have recognized it as a Kleenex box if you hadn't told me it was a Kleenex box. Who made these masks, Yowei?
Fried chicken, phone calls to my friends.
Oh my God, Becky, I got laid off.
Self-worth like dirt, should know better than to hurt. Can't get out of my head, can't get out of my bed. Text left unread, unread. Will I ever find work? Guess I'll stay home and twerk. My inner voice is a jerk.
I want to thank Miles and Elliot for sharing their story, for being so vulnerable, brave, and honest, and for going on this ride with me. And I want to thank Katie Maillard for being our first proxy. Katie actually no longer works in HR, laying people off, but she's still in the game. She has a consulting company called Somehow I Manage, which helps businesses build more human workplaces and helps them make better decisions so that they can avoid laying people off. They also offer coaching to employees around negotiating offers or severance and navigating workplace issues. To learn more, go to somehowimanage.com and links to the layoff song and music video in our show notes. You can listen to the full version of Gold Star on Tidal and Spotify. Thank you to my bedraggled podcast spouse, Kyle Pulley, for being my personal engineer, chef, life coach, and for making a song for me on the weekends. I really should give him a raise. Gold Star was mastered by Ryan Schwab with additional production from Danny Murillo. And a big, big shout out to Alex Beebe for making this ridiculous music video. Go check it out on YouTube. If I can make one person who's been laid off giggle, that's a win. This episode of Proxy was produced by me, Yowei Shaw, edited by John Delore, and mixed by Kyle Pulley. I had research and reporting help from Kim Nadervane-Petersa. Social media by Theo Cobb. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Tile art by Good Tape Studio. Special thanks to Abby Wendell, Amy Ferry, Dawn Norris, Juliana Reyes, Liana Simstrom, Lucy Shen, Mark Pagan, Mathilde Urfolino, Peter Capelli, Rachel Cleban, Sandy Hogue, Sandra Sucher, Sarah Damask, Thomas Liu, Tom Waring, and Wanyu Zhang. Thank you to Patreon for first planting the seed to do this independently and for providing support. And I want to thank all the people who got me through the last year, everyone who wrote messages of support, who gave me advice over the phone, who went on walks with me, who got me through a hard time. And I want to thank everyone who's listening right now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you've made it to the end, you must be feeling this theme music. It's good, right? If you like what you heard, subscribe and rate and review us on iTunes. And please spread the word. This is an independent production. I don't have a marketing budget. Okay, I really need to stop talking and get this to Kyle to master. It's launch day, and we are very behind schedule. See you at patreon.com/proxypodcast until the full season drops.